So today we have Tom Bywater joining the podcast, and Tom's going to be talking about preparing ECTs for SEN and behaviour in primary schools. So Tom, can you just talk to us about sort of how you've got to this point in your journey?
Yeah, of course. So I've recently took on a SENCo role in January. I've previously done a SEN degree as a special needs education studies at University of Wolverhampton. And it led me to this point, really. I've done teaching for about 11, 12 years now, 12th year, I think, this year. I've previously led English. So I led English before moving on to the SENCo role. I've done the ECT mentoring ever since we had the change from NQT to ECT. We recently had a report. We had a report from the appropriate body come in and they checked on our ECT compliance and we got exemplary in that. So we're really proud of where we've gone with our support for the early career teachers. And yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Where are you working now?
At Glebefields Primary School, which is in Kipton.
Yeah. I just wanted to see, before we move on, sort of SEN and behaviour management seems to be a really hot topic, especially since COVID. And I wanted to see, how did your SENCo experience shape the way you support early career teachers in your school?
So when I took on the role of SENCo, it really made me think a bit deeper about support for ECTs, especially with the children with additional needs, because I feel like you're very much thrown into it as an early careers teacher. You go to university lectures, you might have one lecture on special educational needs, you might have one lecture on behaviour, and then you're focusing on curriculum, aren't you? What makes a good lesson, planning a good lesson. And if you haven't got those key skills of how to deal with those children with SEN needs, and not only just your learning needs, it's like your SEMH needs now, which are much more apparent especially in mainstream schools. It's becoming more and more apparent. I think it's really important that you get that across to teachers, that you're not going to be perfect straight away. It's a real starting point, and you're going to find things where me as a SENCo or an experienced teacher, I may not have the perfect answer for you straight away either. It's one of those things where sometimes a bit of trial and error, sometimes about developing that positive relationship, and really really focus on that emotional coach approach in our school. So we talk about, you don't need to just shout or raise your voice at a child to try and instill discipline. It's about talking about, well, I can see you're feeling that way. I understand how you're feeling, and really delving deeper into that and saying it's okay to feel that way. And also not taking it as a point on if myself as a SENCo walk in, or as an SLT members and they're doing a lesson observation, if you walk into them and there's a child that's dysregulated, it's we're looking at how you're dealing with it. It's not an issue. You don't need to panic and think, goodness, my lesson's going to go, it's going to be turned upside down because this child's dysregulated. We're looking for how you're dealing with that, because that's becoming more and more part and parcel of the job.
Yeah, I think it's almost like I was talking to another podcast guest, Caroline, and we were sort of talking how you are prepared for teaching, and you do your sort of teaching degree, and then you're set in the classroom. It's a bit like a driving license. You pass your test, and your first day of learning is the day after you pass your test.
Yeah, 100%. But I say, support-wise, so I try and instill that into them. It's not going to be perfect each time. It's going to take time to embed these routines. When I'm in release time, I try and get in and see those children that they find difficulties with. Try and encourage and let them know, remember, behaviour is a communication. It's not something they're just choosing to do to be awkward. We need to think about delving a bit deeper sometimes with their behaviour. Is it because they find their work too difficult? Is it they find their work too easy? Is it something that's happened at home that morning, or they fell over on the way to school and that's why they're dysregulated? Understanding that communication and trying to find why they're communicating their behaviour in that way, rather than just, don't label them as they're a difficult child.
What do you think the misconceptions of ECTs have around SEN and behaviour when stepping into the classroom?
So I think that is a real big part of it. They think, this is a difficult child. I'm going to follow. I've got some strategies in place for this SEN child. That on their reports, or the SENCos told me to try this, have a now and next board, a visual timetable, and this will help them regulate. It's a lot of the time it will not work, and it'll be those things about them developing their relationship with those children. Those are the children you need to really go in and develop the relationships early. The other children, the ones without the additional needs, they will fall into if you've got routines and boundaries, they'll follow in, that's fine. But that relationship, you really need to target those children to develop those relationships, I think.
What are the things you would do to try and build that relationship earlier?
Getting to know them, asking. I think a big thing I try and instill as well is at the start of the day, the teacher being on the door, welcoming those children in. Good morning, how are you doing? Are you okay? How's your weekend been? You know, did you enjoy your tea last night? Those kind of things. Day-to-day conversation and making them feel like they're a human being, they're heard. Because if you just brush them off and just say, I've got 30 children, I'm just going to I'm going to talk to 30 at once. Those children in particular, the ones with additional needs, are going to find it a lot more difficult. And whereas if they feel like they've got a voice, they're heard, even if it's just asking them a question. If you know you're going to ask a question in the middle of a lesson and thinking, I know some young Charlie's got a good knowledge of place value, I'm going to make it, my cold call is going to be, I'm going to ask Charlie, because I want them to increase their self-esteem in that classroom environment as well, because I don't want them to see as if they are always going to be, one, bothered if they're doing something they shouldn't be, and two, they're always wrong if it's cognition and learning wise. You don't want to be asking questions going, oh, you don't know that one again. So to really pinpoint, one, you build a relationship asking those questions, the day-to-day things, and two, try and really big them up and raise their self-esteem, because they probably have got a really negative outlook on education, because it is probably a really difficult place in their headspace to be in a mainstream classroom.
Is it about, I know when I've spoken to teachers in the past, they've sort of sometimes give the children with maybe more behavioural issues, they'll give them some bits of responsibility, and seem that they really seem to take that on, and obviously that sort of gears the classroom to sort of get to the target that they're trying to do, because they've got less restriction because that person's taken on more responsibility.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. Responsibility is really good for them, especially things like if you have like classroom responsibilities like you apply for at the start of the year. If it's something they really want and something that you've spoken to them about and they seem really passionate about, even if it's something silly like, I really want to be equipment manager, let's say, and I want to make sure that our children's got pencil and things like that. Even if you're doing like an application for it, I would sway and think about, well, this will really benefit this child because it's going to form a positive relationship with us, saying, oh, you know, you've got this responsibility now. It might be things like we do a lot of sensory circuits in mornings and afternoons as well for children who find it difficult to regulate, or they find it's difficult to children who diagnosed with ADHD and autism, if they find it difficult to come straight into learning from playground or from the morning or from lunchtime, they'll go around and do a bit of sensory circuit. So it might be bouncing a ball up and around, it might be running between two cones, it might be some more sensory things. And then it brings them down, ready to learn. And that I found that had a really positive impact this year, which we've, implemented.
Obviously, for a teacher, building that confidence with sort of special education needs, how do you get a teacher to do that?
I think it's really important to the leadership team that we don't focus on the negatives as one. We're going to give them advice. We're going to be positive about it. We're going to tell them what they're doing well in terms of those children, and don't focus on all that child ripped down display today. That shouldn't be happening. These are things that may happen day to day classroom environment with some of these children at the moment. We focus on building those positive relationships. If they need advice, if they want advice, they come to us. We can point them in the right direction, because it might not even be myself. It might not be this deputy head or the head of inclusion who oversees behaviour. It might be a leader that's, in charge of English. It might be to do with them not being able to access the English curriculum. They can go to the English leader and think about, is this okay? How have I done this? And they can give them pointers from their point of view, because inclusion runs throughout school. It's not just, we're just going to go to the SENCo and look at inclusion. We're going to build that almost that community of, right, we can go to any leader about any little issue. It's a real big thing, isn't it? Taking on a classroom from that analogy about the driving license. It's about, you've got to go in and then you've got to think about, right, I've got these children with additional needs. I've got to do my register. I've got to organise a trip. I've got to write a risk assessment. I've got to also do this within all my planning and think about, focus on, that child hasn't quite understood, or that child is dysregulated. They're not engaged in the lesson. You've got to think, really flip the mindset, I think, of some ECTs, because I do think coming into the profession, they take things to heart really quickly sometimes. And that could be to do with the way they've been approached, maybe, or the way they've been observed. And I think it's really important to develop that community spirit of, right, an openness of, you can go to anybody for advice. You can go to your year group partner, because they might have been in the year group 3 or 4 years, and they might have some really good ways of adapting their practice. They might have a teaching assistant who's been there, we've got a few teaching assistants who've been here 20 plus years in this school. They've seen it multiple times. They might have some really good advice that I might not have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about my next point is about adapting lessons to support those individuals that may have EHCP plans or behaviour challenges. It becomes a bit more of a bespoke lesson, but a lesson where everybody's sort of moving on. And I think, what do you think about that?
So I did a staff meeting a few weeks back, and it was it's to do with SEN and accessing the curriculum. And one advice I thought was quite a nice way to think about it was you start your planning backwards, and you plan from your one with the most severe needs, with the cognition and learning. If they can access it, you're adapting for all. You're not just adapting for that child. If you start backwards and think, well, if they're going to access this, everything else should fall into place tier wise. I think, as I said, it's going to be, if it doesn't go to plan straight away, that's okay. Talking about adaptation, I think imprint and widgets across school we use to try and help them access for language and vocabulary is having a real positive impact at the minute. But once again, we don't just stick them in their books. We have them on the board. We'll have them in our visual timetable. It's adaptation for all. Sometimes that child, that mid-ability child, will be thinking, oh, I could use some of that actually, and pinpoint from that to adapt my writing or accept that for my maths. I think it's if you think backwards and think, how is those children with less significant needs going to access the curriculum? But way backwards. That's the best way to go about it, rather than going, oh, okay, well, my great depth child is going to access it by doing this, because otherwise they're going to get left behind. Maths wise, we use a lot of the concrete resources. So we think about manipulatives, how they can access the curriculum. And what we do try is we try and adapt the questioning so they're still aiming for the same learning aim. So they not feel like they're completely out of the loop of the learning of the classroom environment. One thing I would like to tell the ECTs and just staff generally is, when we're doing a learning walk, if anyone's coming in, the best way to see inclusion is if you come into a class and you think, we can't spot the children with significant needs, because they're involved in including the whole environment. Just with those slight adaptations, which talk about imprint, nominate boards, visual timetables, scaffolding wise with key vocab, pre-teaching, all those type of interventions.
Okay, one thing that I think is really important is the relationships with parents and guardians of children with special educational needs. And I think it's really important for a parent to feel heard and for them to feel that they've got a good relationship with their teacher. So how would you encourage ECTs to go about approaching that and maintaining that relationship as well?
So I would always encourage them to be seen and heard on the door. So at the end of days, make sure you're not just dismissing those children. If you've got some concerns, or if the parents got concerns, don't try and shy away from it. Try and address it, because the best way we find in our school with dealing with parents is if you're open and honest with them and you're talking to them and making sure they're heard as well as the child, they're going to be much more inclined to come and develop a relationship with you on the door and throughout their schooling life. If you try and, avoid it, that's when it gets more difficult. I think if you want some support there, if you've got a difficult conversation with a parent, we've talked about finding someone in the class or in school that you're got a good relationship with, to have that chat beforehand. Say, I'm going to have this discussion with parent. Can I just almost role play it with you to see if they think it'll go okay? If it's something to do with their learning and significant needs, they can always invite myself in, or Shannon, who's the inclusion lead in our school, to have that conversation with parents as well. I think we are really open and honest with parents, as we want to show that we are being really inclusive in our school. And sometimes we will get the occasional parental murmur about, or this child has done this to my child. And we're open and honest about children in mainstream education do have significant needs now. And some of these children cannot help the way they are reacting. And as long as it's not in a dangerous situation, we'll deal with it in the best way possible, following our behaviour policy, following our inclusive policy. Because we are all different, especially those differences are becoming more and more apparent, and diagnoses are becoming more and more apparent in schools. There's less and less special places. There's more and more EHCPs being put into schools.
Absolutely.
If that was your child, you would want us to be doing everything we can to be inclusive.
Yeah, and I think it's about like a partnership approach in what are you doing at home, what are you doing here. I think children definitely need consistency, and that has to be through all areas. You can't just be relied on that when they're going to school the teacher has to do all of this for them to come out of school and it gets all unraveled to go to the next day and start all over again. Talking about behaviour, I think this is what we see is this is often one of the biggest concerns for ECTs, especially while they're still just developing their own classroom presence. What do you think new teachers need to understand about behaviour from the beginning?
I think that when you're looking at behaviour as a whole, that's the main thing you need to really try and strive to get high expectations in first, because we can all plan a fantastic lesson and have fantastic quality of planning, adaptation and, activities that are really engaging. But if you haven't got that behaviour behind it, there's no point in delivering it. I think it's about having those really high expectations. Have those high expectations. It's much easier, as I always say, to have really high expectations and lower them slightly for those children who need it, than having low expectations and then trying to bring them up because the children's doing cotton on. I think also it's accessing those conversations if you are finding a child difficult, because at the start you'll find your feet, getting in there early and having discussions with SLT members, with behaviour leads, with SENCOs about difficult behaviours that may be affecting the whole classroom environment. So things can get put in place and external professionals can be brought in if need be early, rather than letting them get to, say, summer term and they've struggled for 2 terms, or letting them get to year 6 and there's still unmet need. We need to get in there really early with that. So the earlier the better, really. So yeah, those really high expectations, talking to us about it, and also having a little bit of thing going, oh, this isn't working. It's always nice to come with a possible solution as well. And I think that's really highly valued by school staff and especially SLT members if they've got a lot going on. If they go in thinking, this isn't working, what if I try this? And then coming to us with solutions as well as, problems. I think people really appreciate that. And I think that's really good to go, like interview wise. And when you're going into a school, thinking about that early on, if you go into an interview as an ECT, being that bit of conversation with the head teacher, or just an email, or just a conversation with the SENCo saying, needs are there in this classroom? Behavioural needs, learning needs. If you have those own conversations, they think, oh, straight away, this person's on it. And this person really wants to develop their practice really early on in their career.
A whole preparation piece, isn't it? Yeah. I think, especially with interview.
Yeah, definitely.
One question in relation to that is, it's a bit off topic, but what do you think about ECTs going into sort of like year 6 classes and stuff? Because I've seen that a number of times over the years, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. One, because obviously I think sometimes in year 6, especially in the summer term, the children know they're going off to another school. Sometimes the behaviour can deteriorate a little bit, and you're an ECT, not had that experience, still trying to get signed off on your modules. That can seem like quite a pressure cooker. So I just wanted to see what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, especially in heat waves and 35 degrees. Yeah, so I think it can be a really good learning point as ECTs to be in year 6, because I think the breadth of the curriculum, if you can teach in year 6 and you've got the subject knowledge for it, it's easy to come down. But I do think it's really important as a school to think about who they're paired with, if there's a year group partner, if it's 2 form or more entries.
Yeah.
If there's experienced year 6 staff in there, I think it could be a real good.
That's where I see that it works well.
If it's, say, a new to year 6 teacher with an ECT, it's really quite difficult then, because there's 2 people sorting advice and they can't bounce off each other.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you've got new to year 6 teachers, which you've been through a few times, you've got your moderation. It often signals a moderation for the writing and things like that, because you've got a new to year 6 teacher or an ECT in there, and which can also be added pressures to just day-to-day management of things.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it'd be a really positive thing to do if there's experience in there. Next year it's an ECT 2 who's just qualifying, going into year 6 for the first time. And she's a little bit apprehensive about it, but she's really excited at the same time, because she's got a really strong, experienced year 6 member of staff there to work with and bounce off.
Yeah, I think it's so much like that. I remember when we first started, all those years ago, we had a particular teacher who's really, really good at early years and reception, and the thought of going into year 6 just even for a day would absolutely horrify her. and one day as a favour she did it for us, but because she had the support, there was that real strong pairing of a teacher in that day, she actually stayed there and then went on permanent to become the year 6 teacher. So sometimes, like we talked earlier, I think it's about perception. Just coming back, there will always be moments where a strategy does not work or a situation escalates, and that can really knock a new teacher's confidence. What should an ECT do when something has not gone well in the classroom?
I think the first thing is don't take it personal. Don't take it personal. They're children, and as I say, it could be an unmet need. That behaviour is a communication. At the end of the day, it's a behavioural issue. I think sorting advice from a approachable SLT is really, really beneficial. Speak to your group partner about it, because once again, they've probably got the experience of being in there for a while. You've got support through support staff. Speak to them about it. If you've got lucky enough to have a support staff in there, speak to them about, do you think if there was anything that might have triggered the children to react in that way? Was there something that, speak to them and think, did I pitch it too high? Did I pitch it too low? But really, number one thing is don't take it personal. There's going to be so many learning journeys you go on as you start as an ECT. And you've got to remember, you've been to university, you've had, even when you've learned, you've had a teacher in the classroom with you, which could make the children react completely differently to you being there by yourself. And yeah, don't take it personally. Those children you will get there with it, as long as you seek the advice you needed, you reflect on it. So think about it at the end of the day, have a bit of reflection time thinking, what did I do maybe that didn't make that lesson as successful as it could be? Did I follow all the things that I need to, advice-wise, that I've had for those children, if it's behavioural needs or cognition and learning needs? Do I need to refresh myself reading through the EHCP or the advice that given? And I do find if we have external advice from like inclusion support or anything like that, there can be really, really wordy documents. And sometimes that can be overwhelming as a typical normal classroom teacher to read, never mind an ECT. So what we've done, and Shannon's developed in Inclusion Hub here, is she'll make it anonymous, just take the child's name out, and she'll just get AI to summarise it for them. So that's a really helpful little tip we found, to say, well, here's a summary of this report. Here are the targets, what are the targets, and it gives them in bullet point forms. So it's like checking over that. Don't take it personal. Sort advice from whoever you feel comfortable with, because there are still people in my school that, I seek loads of advice from. There's still some people you think, I haven't got the relationship with them to talk about it. It's about who you're comfortable with, who you think's got the most, valuable experience in that field, because it might not be the SENCo. As I said, it might be if your English didn't go very well, sort from the English lead. If you're not comfortable going to them, go to the curriculum lead, because they've got really good knowledge about it.
How can those people you're talking about engage more with the ECTs to help build their confidence?
I think that obviously when they're going in, doing their general observation, general book looks, general learning walks, it'd be nice of them to check in on the ECTs, isn't it? It's nice of them to make sure that, because it's the most overwhelming and probably the most daunting experience to have, being a new member of staff. Even if you're experienced, never mind if it's your first job, going in, checking on them, giving them real positive advice. If you've got targets to set, thinking about what's going to have the most impact at that point. Don't give them a list of targets to do. Give them one in between your really positives of this. I think this are the biggest impact to the classroom if you work on this next, and then just follow it up through conversation, through another learning walk, through, if they want to, ask as the ECT, if you want someone to come in, seek it. Don't just wait and bury your head in the sand until you think, oh my goodness, this is getting too much, and then they're coming to do my ECT observation, and I know this is going to go wrong. Actively go out and seek it and talk about those difficulties.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think when you look at the stats, 3 out of 5 ACTs are not working in education within 5 years. So there massively needs to be that support from schools.
100%.
You're talking about the role of mentoring and school support. ECTs should not be expected to manage SEN behaviour in isolation. From your experience as an ECT mentor, what kind of support makes the biggest difference to new teachers?
Being open. So if you're open and honest with them, and they're open and honest with you, that's where you're going to get somewhere quite quickly. If you're just going to say, right, I'll come in and see you in 3 or 4 weeks' time, let me know if you've got any issues, and you just go in 5 minutes and you start tearing things apart, that's not beneficial for either party. And it's being open, honest, having those little and often conversations, little and often drop-ins to make sure that their well-being is okay and the children's well-being is okay. Because if the children's well-being is not okay, the behaviour is going to go. If the ECT's well-being, they're struggling with their well-being, their behaviour management and their management of that classroom is going to struggle. Just going back to one of your previous questions, I just wanted to mention about workload as well and how much of that can have an impact on ECTs, thinking about how many 3 out of 5 are leaving in the first 5 years. I think that has a big, big impact because you're going from university to then into the classroom and thinking every little thing, assessment data, that could be an absolute killer when it comes to workload, because you've got 30 children to assess your reading, writing, maths, then maybe got things to do with your behavioural. There might be an annual review coming up, so the teachers ask you to answer some questions on them. There might be a looked after child that they need to strength and difficulties questionnaire you need filling in for so much time. You've got to think about, I've got to make sure my risk assessment's up to date, ready for my trip next week. I think workload can have a huge impact on people. And what I've found in SENCo especially, coming into this role, it's made me think back to when I was ECT and thinking about what priorities, what have I got to do? And then I'll write my list, have a planner, and then think, I'll just put numbers next to them. Well, this is really essential. I've got to mark my books and make sure my planning's done. Do I need to rearrange my pencil crayons at this moment in time? Probably not. This needs to go down the bottom. Because you do find yourself in those ways sometimes going, I'm completely overwhelmed. I'm going to rearrange my drawers to make sure that they're tidy when you've got all those other things to do. Because it's obviously some sort of, deviation way from it, isn't it? It's like, I can say I can't cope with that at the minute, but you need to address those problems early, I think.
Okay. And I mean, I've heard of that before. I think sometimes it's like taking on your biggest challenges when it's also about yourself, isn't it? Taking on your biggest challenges when you feel like you're healthy, fit, and you're like if you just been to the gym and you're really energized, tackle the most difficult task then, because your brain's going to work quicker and everything. Whereas if you're not feeling so energized, you might look at the pencil case and go, actually, let's just do it. Ticks it off the list.
Yeah, but it's not something that's going to impact the children or your own practice. I think that's a really important thing, though, when you say about gym and getting energized and things like that. Making sure that when you've got your list, make sure you've got time for your extracurricular stuff that you do outside of work. Don't think I've got to haul this back to work and work till 10 p.m. to make sure, I've got this. If you're set for so many days, keep those things going. If you find going to the gym really helpful, if you play a sport, it's really helpful. If you like to read a book, if you like to do, play games or whatever, make sure you don't take that away from your well-being, because your number one priority at that point. If your well-being's not there, the children won't thrive. If the children aren't there, you won't thrive. Vice versa, isn't it?
Yeah. And ultimately, you'll get burn out and the pupils will suffer. So nobody wants that, do they? Okay. So when schools get support for ECTs, right, what difference does that make for pupils and SEN with behavioural needs?
So if that ECT is accessing the support, which hopefully we can put in place, it obviously makes their life a lot easier when it comes to classroom management. If we've given them different strategies that they can follow to try and make sure little Timmy is accessing the curriculum, or little Johnny is on task and is able to use his movement breaks effectively, those things can really help keep the classroom environment a calm and, place to learn. I think it's really important that you've got that calm environment. And that's what we try. That's why I said earlier about emotional coaching, why is making sure we are really on top of talking about how we're feeling. As a teacher, talk about how you're feeling that day. I'm feeling that. We use zones of regulation in our classroom quite often, daily, and it's across school. So they'll have different zones where they can say how they're feeling that morning. And the teacher can have little check-ins with those children if they're feeling upset or angry or frustrated or even, excitable because we've got a trip coming up or we've got a visitor coming in and it's a bit off timetable. Making sure they've got all those little bits of advice from us and implementing the things we've got across school really makes difference, because otherwise, if it's not consistent from the last couple of years, they've had this and this, and they go into a new class with a new teacher where the expectations are different, the classroom environment's different, the way the lessons are set out are different, they use a different type of structure to their lessons, that can really throw children with additional needs.
Okay. For ECTs listening who want to feel more confident with SEN and behavioural needs, where would you suggest they start?
I suggest they start with finding out what their class is like before they start the job. As I said previously in an interview, what the children like, what needs are there. I would suggest go and speak to the SENCo if there's about their additional needs, speaking to the year group partner, speaking to the previous teacher, having a bit of transition with the previous teacher about what children are more difficult to deal with in the classroom environment and why, what needs are there, is a certain particular subject they dislike, or is a certain thing sensory-wise that might set them off? Is the room's too hot or the room's too cold, or they haven't got a padded chair, little things like that. Speaking to previous teachers who when they're transitioning across to you really has a big impact. So I know in school we do that and we hold those conversations when we've got our members of staff. But if you're an ECT going into a new school, it can be really daunting to speak to people, but just get that information from them rather than going in blind in September and starting completely and fresh up and notice, that person can't sit still. If you have that transition with the teacher from the previous year, you're going to know that before you go in. You're going to know names of children. You're going to know what the environment needs to look like.
So teaching can feel intense at the beginning, especially when you're learning how to meet a wide range of needs. What advice would you give to an ECT who's worried they are not getting everything right?
I think, as we said previously, you're not going to get everything right. Go in that mindset, that positive mindset of, right, I'm going to do my best here. I'm going to implement what I think is right after speaking to so-and-so and so-and-so and doing some research on this and implement my CPD from here. I'm going to put these things in place, or I'm going to put these things in place from the reports that I've got. If that doesn't work, that's okay. That is where we can either try something different. We could sort advice from other people. Things you might work for weeks and then all of a sudden it has no effect whatsoever. And that's just day by day, basis. We've got an ECT at the minute in year 3, and she's got a fantastic relationship with a child with an SEMH needs. And he really engages in his learning, and he really wants to do well. But one day every, 5 or 6 weeks, he'll tear her display down. He'll he'll trail go upside down. He'll be really frustrated and angry. And that's not because she's done anything wrong. That can be so many different factors. And sometimes they're really, really hard to pinpoint because they don't want to engage in conversation. Child could be non-verbal. It could be non-verbal. And you'd have to use, the symbols and maybe a bit of Makaton, just visual cues of how they're reacting. You might have to talk to parents about it because day to day, every day is different. You might have fantastic days. You're going to have some which really, really difficult, but just think about the impact you're having. And I say to that teacher, the impact you're having on that child day to day is fantastic. And they're going to have their difficult days. We all have our difficult days. They just express them differently to sometimes the way we would. So yeah, really think positively. It's never going to be 100% perfect, but think about those wins you have day by day. It might even be something as in when they flip their lid and they've completely gone and they've engaged in restorative conversation with me today after 20 minutes of them, having time to reflect on their behaviour. We talked about the emotions and how it's okay to feel that way. After half an hour, they actually came back. They had a conversation with me and they wrote that sentence that I wanted them to do half an hour ago. That's a real positive. Don't feel like that behaviour is be all and end all of your week or your day or your career, because you're going to get many of them. And you've got to think about, especially those children with additional needs, those positives that you get day in, day out massively outweigh that big emotion that you might get one day.
Right. If listeners only took one message from this episode about ECTs, SEN and behaviour, what would you want it to be?
Be reflective. Be reflective on your approach. Don't beat yourself up about the bad days. The good days will be there. They'll be fantastic. Be reflective on them. I think that's the main thing. If you reflect on what not gone the way you want it to, and I try and identify a trigger or identify why it hasn't gone that way, and you can self-reflect and find that the next lesson that you do, and you've identified that trigger, and it was something that was successful, then I think that's a really positive mindset to have. And if it doesn't, once again, reflect again, and you can always bring people in then to help you reflect. As we said just previously, don't beat yourself up when it comes to children not complying if that emotion is there, that big emotion where they're not going to listen to anybody. Some people say, don't listen to those people who might walk around school going, oh, they didn't do that for me, because I guarantee you they did. And it's, it's a big, what they call them mood hoovers, don't they, sometimes?
Yeah.
Don't listen to them. Listen to those real people that are reflective, those people who are approachable, and don't beat yourself up. You'll be fantastic if you have that positive mindset, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's so true. surround yourself with people who you want to sort of be like who and emulate, and those are usually the ones who are reflective and take, well, we've tried this bit different tomorrow, it'll work.
Yeah.
Last question. What do you think ECTs need to hear more often when it comes to supporting children with additional needs from their schools?
I think one thing for them to hear is probably like SENCOs, inclusion managers, deputies, external experts. They don't always have an answer straight away. Some things need to be down to like trial and error, thinking about what you put in place. If that's not working, try something different. Don't give up if it doesn't work for one day, because that could be a new routine, which when it's embedded will help them. But also, on the flip side, if you've tried something for half a term and every day it's had a negative impact, don't continue with trying to implement it. It's obviously not going to have an impact at that point. That's when you would seek some advice saying, this isn't working. Don't be afraid to go. People and go, I've tried this for 6 weeks now, 5 or 6 weeks. It hasn't had an impact. It just sets the child off. They flip their lid. They don't engage in conversation when we come to trying this intervention, or this piece of adaptation in my planning doesn't have an impact. Don't just go for it because they've said try it. If it's not working, go back and say, this wasn't being worked, this was successful. What about this? Once again, try and have an answer. Go with an answer rather than a problem, which really helps. And also don't expect a magic wand. It's going to change within one day. It's about finding that balance.
Tom, thank you very much. You have been really insightful. I've certainly learned some things today. So thanks for coming on.
No, thank you so much, Grant, for inviting me.
Thank you.